She was born in a small town where everyone knew each other and where life moved slowly. It's like the sun setting over the fields every evening. From the moment she opened her eyes, or rather, from the moment she entered the world, it was clear she would experience it differently than most children. She was blind, and while her family loved her dearly, they could not shield her from the quiet judgments of the world around her. People in the neighborhood would stare at her when she walked down the street, whispering behind their hands, sometimes pitying her, sometimes doubting what she could do. They saw her as fragile, as someone who would always need help, someone who could never fully take part in life the way others did. Her parents, however, believed in her. They saw something in her eyes, even if they were dark and unable to see the world. Something that reflected a depth of understanding far beyond her years. They knew she could listen, feel, and sense things that most people ignored. From an early age, she had a remarkable ability to notice sounds, to recognize voices and movements, to feel emotions in the tone of someone speaking. Her mother would say she could hear the world more clearly than anyone else. It was her grandmother who first introduced her to the piano. Her grandmother was a patient woman, always calm and gentle, with a love for music that had never faded. She would sit beside the little girl, placing her tiny hands on the keys and letting her feel the smoothness, the curves, the different textures of each note. The girl loved the feeling of the keys under her fingers, the way they vibrated slightly when pressed. She could not see the black and white patterns, but she felt the difference, the rhythm, the energy that flowed through the instrument. It became a sanctuary, a world where she could express herself without fear, without judgment. At first her attempts were clumsy. Her fingers would wander, missing the right keys, hitting wrong notes. Sometimes she would get frustrated, tears streaming down her cheeks. But her grandmother would simply smile and guide her hands again. "Listen to the music in your heart," she would say. "The piano will follow you if you follow it." Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, she began to understand. She began to play simple melodies, small songs that made her feel proud. Her family would clap and cheer, not because she was perfect, but because she was trying, because she was learning to find her voice in a world that often ignored her. School was a different story. Other children were not always kind. Some were curious, asking questions that sometimes hurt. "Can you really see anything?" they would ask. "How do you even know where to go?" They did not understand that she experienced life differently, that her senses were heightened in ways they could not imagine. At school events, when music or art was involved, she would often sit quietly, listening to others, dreaming of the day she might perform. When she mentioned wanting to play the piano in front of people, the whispers started. Some laughed, thinking it was impossible. "She can't see the keys," they said. "How will she ever play?" Despite this, she practiced every day. The piano was her constant companion. The familiar feel of the keys beneath her fingers brought comfort. Her mother would help her learn new songs, describing the notes and rhythms, teaching her by touch and sound. Her fingers memorized patterns, her hands learned the spaces between notes, and her ears caught the slightest changes in tone. Music became more than a hobby. It became a way for her to understand the world, to communicate what she could not say with words. Her talent was quiet at first. Only her family saw it fully. Only her grandmother truly understood how deeply she connected with the instrument. Neighbors would hear her playing sometimes through an open window, but they rarely paid attention. Some would shake their heads, thinking she was wasting her time. "Why bother?" they would say. "She can't see, how much can she really do?" But she did not let their words affect her. Inside, she felt a fire growing. She wanted to show people that ability was not limited to sight, that talent could shine even in the darkness. She dreamed of the day she could sit in front of a real audience, play the piano, and let her music speak for her. She imagined the surprise on their faces, the disbelief turning into admiration. It was a dream that kept her fingers moving. That kept her practicing late into the night. Often, when the house was silent and the only sounds were the gentle hum of the piano and the soft rhythm of her own heartbeat, her daily life was full of small challenges. Walking to school, navigating crowded streets, and completing her lessons required more effort than others. But each day she grew stronger, more confident. Her mind absorbed details in ways others overlooked: the rustle of leaves, The footsteps on the pavement, the laughter of children playing in the distance, all these sounds became part of her music, part of her understanding of the world. She learned to notice patterns, rhythms, and harmonies in everyday life, and she brought them to the piano, letting her hands translate the world she could hear but not see at school. A few teachers began to notice her abilities. They saw her concentration, her determination, and the way she practiced diligently without complaint. One music teacher in particular recognized her potential. She would listen to the girl play, amazed at the clarity and emotion in each note. The teacher began to work with her, teaching her more complex pieces, guiding her through difficult arrangements, and encouraging her to perform for small audiences. With each lesson, her confidence grew. She began to imagine a time when she might play for more than just family and teachers, when her music could touch the hearts of people who had never truly listened before. Even so, the whispers from her peers never completely faded. Some children would tease her, call her names, or express disbelief at her abilities. At first, their words stung, making her doubt herself. But over time, she learned to ignore them, to focus on the music and the joy it brought her. She understood that the world was not always kind, but that did not mean she could not shine. Each note she played was an act of courage, a statement that she was more than her disability, that she had something valuable to offer. Her family remained her anchor. Her parents would often watch her practice, their hearts swelling with pride. They knew the road ahead would not be easy, but they also knew that she had a gift that could not be ignored. Her grandmother continued to guide her, patiently correcting mistakes, praising progress, and reminding her that every musician, sighted or not, starts with small steps. "The world may not understand you yet," her grandmother would say, "but one day they will. Keep playing, and they will listen." The small town continued its routines, largely unaware of the quiet determination growing within this blind girl. Neighbors went about their daily lives, busy with chores and work, rarely paying attention to the girl who practiced relentlessly in a corner of her home. They could not see the hours she spent at the piano, the dedication that poured from her soul into every note. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, her music began to take shape. She was no longer just a child fumbling with keys. She was becoming a musician, someone who could express emotion, tell stories, and capture attention without a single word she would sometimes imagine, the moment she would finally perform for a real audience. She pictured the room, the faces, the initial skepticism, and then the surprise as the first notes filled the air. She imagined people leaning forward, eyes widening, hearts opening, all because she dared to follow her passion despite the doubts and laughter of others. This vision became her motivation, the dream that guided her through every difficult practice session, every misstep, every moment of self-doubt. Though life had not been easy, and though many had underestimated her, she carried a quiet strength within her. It was not a strength that relied on sight, but on perseverance, patience, and the power of music to transcend barriers. She knew that one day her abilities would be recognized, that her music would speak louder than any words or doubts. She practiced with a purpose, with focus, and with an unwavering belief that she was meant to share her gift with the world. Every day, the blind girl at the piano took one more step toward that moment, building a foundation for a future where mockery would give way to awe, and doubt would transform into admiration. The morning of the community music event arrived with a quiet excitement that seemed to hang in the air. The little girl, now a bit older and more confident in her abilities, woke early, her heart beating faster than usual. Today was not just another day of practice at home. Today she would have the chance to play in front of real people, a room filled with expectations, curiosity, and perhaps doubt. She could hear the hum of preparation outside her home, the murmurs of neighbors, the clatter of chairs being set up, and the occasional laughter from those already gathering for the event. Everything felt louder, sharper, more alive. And she absorbed it all with her heightened senses, feeling both nervous and exhilarated. Her parents helped her get ready, making sure she had everything she needed. They walked with her slowly to the hall, guiding her through streets she had passed many times, but that always seemed different when more people were around. As they approached, The sounds of chatter and music grew stronger. The hall smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, mixed with the scent of flowers brought for decoration. Volunteers moved quickly, arranging chairs, setting up instruments, and whispering instructions to each other. The little girl could feel the energy in the room, a mix of anticipation and mild chaos, and it made her stomach flutter. When they entered the hall, she could hear the immediate shift in attention. Some people turned to look at her, curiosity painted across their faces. Others whispered to each other, and she could sense their doubts even without seeing them. Can she really play? One voice asked quietly, and another replied with a dismissive laugh. Some shook their heads, and a few simply ignored her, continuing with their own conversations. She felt a familiar twinge of nervousness, but she reminded herself of all the hours she had spent practicing, the music that had become a part of her, and the guidance of her grandmother that had brought her this far. She focused on the piano waiting for her, the familiar shape, the keys she knew so well. The organizers hesitated for a moment when her family requested that she be allowed to play. She could sense the uncertainty in their voices, the unspoken question of whether this would be a mistake. A few exchanged glances, as if unsure who would support the idea and who would oppose it. Finally, a kind woman in charge of the event nodded and said, "All right, let her have a turn. Everyone deserves a chance." There was a brief pause, and then murmurs filled the room again, some amused, some doubtful, but mostly indifferent. The little girl took a deep breath and followed her parents toward the stage. Guided by the sound of their voices and the familiar feel of the floor beneath her feet as she approached the piano, the room seemed to grow quiet for just a moment, though whispers continued at the edges. She could feel the cool surface of the instrument, the gentle slope of the keys under her fingers, and the space around it. People were beginning to notice her presence, some leaning slightly forward, curious to see what she could do. She adjusted the bench to the right height and positioned herself comfortably. Her hands hovered above the keys for a brief moment, connecting with the instrument in a way that went beyond sight. It was as if she and the piano were already speaking to each other. Understanding what the other needed, the first few seconds were tense. She paused, letting her fingers rest lightly on the keys, feeling their texture and the vibrations through the wood. The audience was still, though a few chuckled quietly, expecting mistakes, expecting her to struggle. Some even whispered, questioning if she could find the right notes at all. She closed her eyes, as she always did when practicing, and let her ears guide her. She listened to the faint hum of the room, the subtle shifts in sound as people moved, the quiet breathing of those around her. Then, with a gentle touch, she pressed the first key. The note rang out clearly, pure and soft, filling the small hall. A few heads turned, curious, while others continued to whisper, still skeptical. She continued, letting her fingers move naturally across the keys, following the music she had practiced so many times. The notes began to flow together, forming melodies that were gentle, emotional, and surprisingly confident. There was a depth to her playing that seemed to pull the audience in, even those who had doubted her. Her music spoke in a language everyone could understand, a story told without words, full of feeling, experience, and quiet determination. At first, some people still smiled or whispered, unsure if this was going to be impressive or just a minor curiosity. But as the music continued, the mood in the room shifted. People stopped talking, leaning forward slightly in their seats, listening intently. The notes danced, rose, and fell, carrying a story of struggle and hope. The little girl played with precision and emotion, her fingers guided by memory, touch, and sound. She was not thinking about the audience, not worrying about mistakes. She was lost in the music, letting it flow through her and out into the room. The room was transformed. What had begun as a quiet, doubtful space became filled with something much more powerful: attention, respect, and awe. Some listeners closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others exchanged glances, realizing they had misjudged the girl at the piano. Each note seemed to tell a story of determination, of years of practice and patience, a young life shaped by challenges that no one else could fully understand. The laughter that had been there before disappeared completely, replaced by silence that was almost reverent. The piece she was playing was not overly complicated, but it carried a depth and emotional resonance that few could ignore. Her hands moved with confidence, guided by experience and the connection she had formed with the piano over countless hours of practice. The audience could feel the rhythm, the pauses, the crescendos, and the gentle falls, as if they themselves were part of the story. Even those who had come with low expectations found themselves captivated, unable to look away or dismiss what they were hearing. Some children in the audience, who had once whispered and laughed at her in school, were sitting quietly now, eyes wide, mouths slightly open in surprise. They could not understand how she had learned to play so beautifully without being able to see. Adults were leaning in, some with tears forming, recognizing the talent and courage that had brought her to this moment. The room that had once been filled with doubt and mockery was now filled with a sense of wonder and admiration. The little girl, unaware of the change in perception, continued to play, her focus entirely on the piano and the music that seemed to flow naturally from her fingers. Her parents watched from the side, hearts full of pride and relief. They had believed in her from the beginning, and now they saw the proof in the reactions of those around her. Her grandmother, sitting quietly nearby, smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. She had known this day would come, had felt it in the hours of practice and guidance. And now the world was beginning to see what she had always known, that the girl at the piano had a gift that could not be ignored. As the piece reached its conclusion, the little girl added a few gentle, lingering notes. Allowing the music to fade naturally, there was a brief moment of silence, as if the audience could not yet comprehend what had just happened. Then slowly, the applause began. It started as a few claps, then grew louder, until the entire hall was filled with the sound of hands coming together in appreciation and amazement. Some people stood, unable to contain their admiration. Others whispered words of praise, some even shaking their heads in disbelief. The little girl, still at the piano, felt a warm rush of emotion. She could hear the applause, feel the energy of the room, and for the first time, she understood that her music had reached beyond her family and teachers. It had touched strangers, had changed perceptions, had transformed doubt into respect after the applause. People approached her, some with tears in their eyes, others with smiles and words of encouragement. They wanted to shake her hand, ask questions, and express their surprise at her talent. A few apologized for doubting her abilities, acknowledging that they had judged her unfairly. She listened quietly, smiling, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment that went beyond personal satisfaction. She had done more than play the piano. She had made people see her as she truly was, not limited by her blindness, but defined by her talent, her determination, and her courage. The event organizers, who had initially been unsure about letting her perform, came forward to congratulate her. They admitted that they had expected little more than a simple, polite effort, and yet she had delivered something remarkable. Her music had left a lasting impression on everyone present, and they knew they had witnessed a special moment that would be remembered for years. The little girl, still guided by the touch of the piano and her family's supportive hands, felt a quiet satisfaction. She had faced doubt, mockery, and skepticism, and she had responded with talent, grace, and courage. As the crowd began to disperse, she continued to play softly, savoring the moment. She did not play for the applause or the recognition. She played because it was part of who she was. The experience had given her confidence, a sense of purpose, and the knowledge that she could overcome any obstacle with patience, practice, and belief in herself. She had transformed a room filled with doubt into a space of wonder and respect, and she understood that this was only the beginning of a journey that would continue to surprise and inspire those around her. Walking home later with her parents, she felt a quiet joy and contentment. The town she had once felt hesitant to face now seemed different. People would remember what they had seen and heard today. They had seen a girl who was blind play the piano with a skill and emotion that few could match. They had seen proof that talent is not limited by physical limitations, and that courage and dedication can change perceptions in ways that are profound and lasting. The little girl, though exhausted from the excitement and nerves, felt stronger, more determined, and ready to after her first public performance. The blind girl felt a mix of excitement and calm determination. The applause, the surprised faces, the kind words she received had given her confidence, but she knew this was only the beginning. Her music was not just about showing others. It was about expressing herself and sharing the feelings she carried inside. She wanted every note she played to speak the truth of her journey, the struggles, the practice, the emotions that had shaped her. Every day, she returned to the piano with a renewed sense of purpose. Eager to explore new melodies, challenge herself with more complex pieces, and deepen her connection with the instrument she loved at home. The routine of practice became even more intense. She spent hours at the piano, her fingers moving over the keys with a precision and understanding that seemed almost magical. Each day she tackled a new piece, breaking it down into sections, memorizing patterns, feeling the vibrations as her fingers pressed the keys. Her parents watched with pride, sometimes quietly wiping tears as they listened to the depth and emotion in her playing. They could see that music was not just a skill for her, it was a language, a way of communicating her inner world to those willing to listen. Word about her performance had spread through the town, and more people became curious about the blind girl who could play so beautifully. Some came to her home to hear her practice, offering encouragement and admiration. Others were skeptical at first, but they could not deny the talent and emotion in her music. She welcomed these listeners with humility, never boasting, always focusing on the piano and the story she wanted to tell through her notes. Every day she grew stronger, more confident, and more connected to the music that had become her voice. One day, a local music teacher visited her family after hearing about her performance. The teacher was impressed and wanted to offer guidance, helping her refine her skills and expand her repertoire. They began to meet regularly, and the girl eagerly absorbed every lesson, learning new techniques and discovering ways to express more subtle emotions through her playing. The teacher introduced her to more complex pieces, challenging her to push beyond what she thought was possible. She embraced each challenge with determination, understanding that mastery required patience, practice, and an openness to learning. The girl also began to dream bigger. She imagined performing in larger halls, sharing her music with more people, and inspiring others who faced obstacles in their own lives. She imagined a moment when the audience would not see her blindness as a limitation, but recognize her for the talent, dedication, and courage that defined her. These dreams fueled her daily practice, giving her the motivation to work through difficult passages, to repeat sections until they were perfect, and to continue learning despite any setbacks. At school, her peers noticed a change. Some who had once whispered or laughed now watched her with respect, curious to see how she had improved. A few approached her with questions about music, wanting to understand how she learned, how she memorized pieces, and how she felt when she played. Though the initial curiosity was sometimes mixed with skepticism, over time, her talent began to earn their admiration. Even those who had doubted her started to recognize the effort, patience, and skill that had brought her to this point. It was not just her ability to play the piano that impressed them, but the grace, determination, and humility she displayed in doing so. Her parents continued to support her, ensuring she had the resources she needed. Whether it was access to sheet music and braille, a quiet space to practice, or time with her teacher, they reminded her that success was not about proving anyone wrong, but about embracing her passion and sharing it with sincerity. The encouragement from her family, combined with her own inner drive, helped her stay focused and motivated. She began to see the piano not just as an instrument, but as a lifelong companion, partner in expressing everything she felt inside. As the months passed, the blind girl started performing at more events. Each performance brought new challenges, the nerves of a larger audience, the pressure to perform perfectly, and the need to convey emotion through every note. Yet, with each experience, she grew stronger. She learned to control her nerves, to focus her attention entirely on the music, and to connect with her audience in a way that transcended words. People were no longer skeptical. They were listening, fully engaged, moved by the depth of her playing. One evening, at a community fundraiser, she sat at the piano as the room filled with people eager to hear her play. At first, there was a quiet murmur, some curiosity, and a few doubtful glances. But as her fingers touched the keys, and the first notes resonated through the hall, the atmosphere changed. Her music began gently, soft and inviting, capturing the attention of everyone present. As she continued, her melodies became richer, more intricate, weaving stories of determination, hope, and the beauty of overcoming obstacles. People leaned forward, listening intently, captivated by the emotion and skill in her playing. A few individuals, who had previously doubted her abilities, sat silently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to amazement. They could not believe that someone who could not see had such control, precision, and understanding of the music. Her performance was not just about hitting the right notes, it was about conveying feelings, telling stories, and connecting with the audience on a deeply human level. By the time she reached the final chord, the room was silent, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then applause erupted, filling the hall with warmth and admiration. Some stood, clapping enthusiastically, while others wiped tears from their eyes. Moved by the beauty and depth of her music, her parents beamed with pride, and her teacher smiled knowingly. They had always believed in her, but seeing the audience react with such emotion and respect was a confirmation of what they had long known. She had a gift that could touch hearts and change perceptions. After the performance, many people approached her, offering words of encouragement, praise, and curiosity. They asked how she had learned, how she memorized complex pieces, and how she expressed so much emotion without being able to see. She answered politely, sharing her love for music and the hours of practice that had brought her to this moment. The blind girl realized that her journey was not just about her own growth, but also about inspiring others. She understood that her music could break barriers, challenge assumptions, and encourage people to see beyond physical limitations. Each performance was an opportunity to show that determination, practice, and passion could overcome doubt, and that talent could shine in anyone. Regardless of their circumstances, over time her reputation grew. Local newspapers wrote stories about her performances, highlighting her talent and the emotion she brought to her music. Community members invited her to perform at various events, from school programs to charity fundraisers. Each opportunity allowed her to connect with more people, to share her story, and to inspire others who faced challenges in their own lives. Her music became a bridge, linking her experiences with the hearts of those who listened. Despite the growing attention, she remained humble. She continued to practice diligently, knowing that every performance required preparation, focus, and a deep connection to the music. She welcomed advice from her teachers, guidance from her family, and feedback from audiences, always seeking ways to improve. Her dedication was unwavering, driven by a desire to express herself authentically, to share her passion with sincerity. Her success also brought new challenges. Some people expected perfection, while others compared her to sighted musicians. The blind girl learned to navigate these pressures, focusing on the joy of music rather than the expectations of others. She understood that mistakes were part of growth, and that every performance, no matter how small, was an opportunity to learn, to connect, and to inspire. She embraced each challenge with courage, patience, and a belief in her own abilities. Through it all, her family remained her anchor. They celebrated her achievements, guided her through setbacks, and reminded her of the importance of staying true to herself. Her grandmother continued to offer wisdom, encouraging her to feel the music deeply, to play with emotion, and to trust her instincts. The bond between them strengthened, built on years of shared practice, guidance, and love. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a symbol of resilience, growth, and the power of passion. The blind girl also began to mentor younger students who were learning music. She shared her techniques, her approach to memorization, and her love for the piano. She encouraged them to believe in themselves, to practice diligently, and to embrace their unique abilities. Through teaching, she discovered a new way to connect with others, to inspire, and to make a positive impact on her community. Her music and her story became a source of hope, demonstrating that challenges could be transformed into opportunities for growth and expression. As the years passed, Her skills continued to develop. She explored different genres of music, experimented with improvisation, and learned to convey complex emotions through her playing. Each piece she performed was a reflection of her journey, a testament to the countless hours of practice, the support of her family, and her unwavering determination. Audiences continued to be captivated, moved, and inspired by her performances, and she began to gain recognition beyond her small town. Yet, despite the growing attention, she remained grounded. She played for the love of music, for the joy it brought her, and for the opportunity to share something meaningful with others. She understood that true success was not measured by applause or recognition, but by the impact she had on the hearts and minds of those who listened. Her music became a vehicle for connection, empathy, and understanding, bridging gaps between people and fostering appreciation for talent, courage, and resilience. Through every performance, every lesson, and every practice session, the next performance was unlike any she had done before. This time it was a larger event, held in a hall she had never visited, with a bigger audience and a more formal atmosphere. The blind girl felt a mixture of excitement and nerves as she arrived. The sounds of people moving, chatting, and preparing for the event filled the space around her. Volunteers were arranging chairs, adjusting microphones, and tuning instruments. She could hear every movement, every whisper, every small detail, and it heightened her awareness. She knew the room would be challenging, larger than what she was used to, but she felt ready. Her music had prepared her, her practice had prepared her, and the support of her family and teachers had given her confidence. Walking toward the stage, she could hear the murmurs of the audience. Some were familiar faces from her previous performances. Others were strangers curious to see the blind girl who had been making waves in the town. She sensed skepticism in a few voices, curiosity in others, and quiet excitement among those who had heard her play before. Her parents walked beside her, guiding her carefully, and she felt their reassurance. The stage felt different under her feet, the space broader, the piano larger, yet familiar. She positioned herself on the bench, adjusting it to the right height, and ran her fingers lightly across the keys. The texture, the vibrations, the familiar contours, all of it welcomed her, grounding her in the moment as she began to play. The first notes filled the hall, soft and gentle, drawing the audience's attention. The initial skepticism faded as the melodies took shape. She played with emotion, precision, and confidence, allowing the music to tell a story that transcended words. Her fingers danced across the keys, guided by memory, touch, and the deep understanding she had developed through years of practice. The audience, once hesitant, became completely absorbed, listening intently to the story she was conveying. This time the hall was larger and the acoustics more complex. The sound echoed differently, requiring her to adjust her touch and timing. She could feel the vibrations, sense the resonance, and adapt intuitively. Each note carried a sense of purpose, each chord a reflection of her journey. The music grew in intensity, rising and falling with emotion, capturing the attention of everyone present. People who had come with doubt now sat in awe, unable to ignore the depth and skill in her playing. Among the audience were individuals who had never believed a blind person could play the piano well. Some had come to witness a spectacle, expecting mistakes or awkward pauses. But as the performance continued, their expressions changed from doubt to surprise and eventually to admiration. They leaned forward, their eyes widening, captivated by the grace and emotion conveyed through the music. The blind girl had a way of making the piano speak her story, of letting the audience feel the struggles and triumphs that had shaped her. Every note was a reflection of her perseverance. Every pause a moment of heartfelt expression. As the piece progressed, she introduced subtle variations and improvisation she had practiced in secret. These flourishes added depth and personality to the performance, drawing the audience further into her world. Her music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a conversation, a bridge between her experience and the emotions of those listening. The audience responded unconsciously, swaying slightly, closing their eyes, or letting tears fall as they became immersed in the narrative created by her hands on the keys. Some people in the audience, moved by the performance, whispered to each other, expressing astonishment at the talent displayed. A few wiped their eyes, feeling the emotions conveyed through the music. Even the skeptics, those who had come to judge or doubt, were silenced, unable to deny the beauty and power of what they were witnessing. The blind girl continued, focused entirely on the music, letting it flow naturally, letting it speak the story she had carried for so long. Her parents watched from the sidelines, hearts full of pride and joy. They had guided her, supported her, and believed in her from the beginning. And now they saw the impact of their encouragement. Her teacher, standing nearby, nodded approvingly, recognizing the maturity and skill that had developed over years of dedicated practice. The blind girl had grown not only as a musician, but also as a performer, learning to connect with audiences and convey emotion through her art. The performance reached its climax with a series of intricate passages and soaring melodies. The audience was completely captivated, held in rapt attention by the combination of technical skill and emotional depth. Every note seemed to tell a part of her story, every chord reflected her journey, and every pause allowed the room to feel the weight of her experiences. The hall was alive with the energy of the music, and the blind girl, focused entirely on the piano, felt a sense of fulfillment and connection that went beyond words. When the final note resonated through the hall, there was a moment of silence, a collective pause as the audience absorbed what they had just experienced. Then applause erupted, loud and enthusiastic, filling the hall with energy and admiration. Some stood, clapping, cheering, and expressing their amazement. Others quietly expressed their awe through tears or whispered words of appreciation. The blind girl sat at the piano, absorbing the response, feeling a warm rush of emotion and satisfaction. She had shared her music, her story, and her heart, and the audience had listened, understood, and been moved. After the performance, people approached her with congratulations, praise, and curiosity. They asked how she had learned to play so beautifully without being able to see, how she memorized complex pieces, and how she conveyed such emotion through her music. She responded politely, sharing her love for the piano, her practice routines, and the guidance she had received from her family and teachers. She spoke with humility, emphasizing the importance of dedication, patience, and belief in oneself. Her words were as inspiring as her music, offering encouragement to those who faced their own challenges. The blind girl also noticed younger children in the audience, their eyes wide with admiration and wonder. They approached her shyly, asking questions about learning the piano, practicing, and performing. She took the time to answer, encouraging them to pursue their passions, to believe in their abilities, and to practice diligently. She understood that her journey could inspire others, and she felt a responsibility to share her experience and support those who were just beginning to explore their own talents. Her performances continued to grow in scale and recognition. Invitations to play at community events, school functions, and local festivals became more frequent. Each event offered new challenges, larger audiences, unfamiliar venues, and greater expectations. Yet, with every performance, she grew more confident, more skilled, and more connected to her music. She learned to adapt to different acoustics, to manage performance anxiety, and to engage audiences with both technical skill and emotional depth. Through these experiences, she discovered the transformative power of music. Her performances were no longer just personal achievements. They became moments of connection and inspiration. Audiences were moved, encouraged, and reminded of the beauty that could emerge from perseverance, passion, and dedication. The blind girl had become more than a talented musician. She had become a symbol of determination, resilience, and the human capacity to overcome obstacles. Her family remained her foundation. They continued to support her, celebrate her successes, and guide her through challenges. Her grandmother remained a source of wisdom and encouragement, helping her deepen her understanding of music and the emotions it could convey. Together, they explored new pieces, discussed musical interpretation, and reflected on the impact of her performances. The piano had become a central part of her life, a companion in both practice and performance, and a tool for sharing her story with the world. The blind girl also began to experiment with composing her own music, drawing on her experiences, emotions, and imagination. She created melodies that reflected her journey and the feelings she wanted to convey. These original pieces were performed at events, receiving admiration and praise from audiences who were moved by the depth, creativity, and sincerity of her music. Composition offered her a new form of expression, allowing her to communicate more personally and to explore her artistic voice in ways that performance alone could not. As she continued to grow as a musician, she also became more aware of her influence on others. Her story and her music inspired not only those who could see her perform, but also individuals facing their own challenges. People began to recognize that limitations could be transformed into strengths, that passion, dedication, and resilience could overcome obstacles. Her performances became opportunities for audiences to reflect on their own lives, to appreciate talent and perseverance, and to be reminded of the human capacity for growth and achievement. The blind girl's journey was not without difficulties. She encountered moments of self-doubt, technical challenges, and occasional skepticism from new audiences. Yet, she approached each challenge with patience, focus, and determination. She practiced diligently, sought guidance from teachers, and relied on the support of her family. Each difficulty became an opportunity for learning and growth, strengthening her skills, resilience, and confidence. She understood that the path to mastery required effort, persistence, and a willingness to face and overcome obstacles. Her performances continued to evolve, becoming more expressive, nuanced, and emotionally powerful. Audiences were captivated not only by her technical skill, but also by the sincerity and depth of feeling in her music. Each performance told a story, conveyed emotion, and created a connection between the musician and the listeners. She had transformed her passion into a form of communication that transcended words, reaching hearts and minds through the universal language of music, through every performance, every practice session, and every composition. The blind girl had reached a point where every performance carried a sense of purpose, not just for herself, but for everyone who listened. She had learned that her music could inspire, move, and even change perceptions. It was a quiet power, something she felt deeply as she prepared for what was to become her most important performance yet. This was a regional music showcase, one where talented individuals from surrounding towns would gather. Judged not just by the audience but by experienced musicians and teachers, the stakes felt higher, and yet there was also an immense excitement. She understood that this was an opportunity to show not only her skills, but the strength of her spirit, the culmination of years of practice, dedication, and perseverance. The day of the showcase arrived and the hall was buzzing with activity. Participants were tuning instruments, rehearsing quietly, and moving about with the anticipation of performance day. The blind girl felt her usual mix of nerves and excitement. Her parents and teacher were beside her, offering support and reassurance. She relied on their presence as a guiding anchor, helping her focus and calm her mind. Every sound in the hall, the footsteps, the voices, the rustle of papers added to her awareness and allowed her to prepare mentally for the stage. She visualized the piano in her mind, mapped out the sequence of notes, and felt the rhythm in her fingers, readying herself for the music that would flow from her heart as she approached the stage. She could hear whispers and murmurs from the audience. Some were skeptical, curious about how a blind girl could perform among other talented participants. Others were intrigued, eager to see what she could offer. She paused briefly, taking in the sounds and energy of the hall. Then she sat at the piano, positioning herself carefully, letting her hands rest lightly on the keys. The familiar sensation of the keys under her fingers brought a sense of calm. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and began to play.